So, Harvard researchers are now using Apple Watch data to study what happens to our sleep during menopause. Turns out your wrist might be collecting some pretty valuable information about your transition that even your doctor doesn't have access to yet.
Hi there, I'm Tony Lee, and this is Hot Flasher, your daily menopause podcast that serves up fresh news, research, and wellness tips. I've built a daily news pipeline to find the latest on women's health and menopause research. Allow me to introduce my co-host Nykki, who handles the headlines. Take it away, Nykki.
Thanks, Tony. We've got some really interesting stuff to dig into today. I want to start with something that I think is going to resonate with a lot of you. There's new research out from PubMed looking at ADHD across different reproductive stages in women, including menopause. And honestly, this feels like one of those connections that should have been obvious all along, but somehow we're just now getting solid research on it. The study looked at how ADHD symptoms change during menstruation, pregnancy, and menopause. What they found is that hormonal fluctuations can really mess with ADHD management. During perimenopause and menopause, when estrogen is doing its chaotic dance before eventually dropping off, women with ADHD often see their symptoms get worse. This makes total sense when you think about it. Estrogen affects dopamine and norepinephrine, the same neurotransmitters that ADHD medications target. So, when estrogen levels start fluctuating wildly during perimenopause, it's like someone keeps adjusting the volume on your brain chemistry. What really struck me about this research is how it validates what so many women have been experiencing, but maybe couldn't quite articulate. You know that feeling when your usual coping strategies just stop working? When suddenly you can't focus the way you used to, or you're more impulsive, or your emotions feel harder to regulate. If you have ADHD, menopause might be amplifying all of that. The researchers noted that many women don't get diagnosed with ADHD until later in life, sometimes not until perimenopause hits and their symptoms become impossible to ignore. There's something both frustrating and relieving about that frustrating, because we've been struggling without understanding why, but relieving because it means we're not imagining things. If this sounds familiar, it might be worth talking to your doctor about whether ADHD could be part of what you're experiencing. The study suggests that treatment approaches might need to be adjusted during menopause, taking into account both the hormonal changes and the ADHD symptoms. Moving on to something completely different and kind of cool, Harvard researchers are using Apple Watch sleep data to study the menopause transition. This caught my attention because it's such a smart way to gather real-world data about what's actually happening to our sleep during this time. Traditional sleep studies happen in labs, which is useful, but doesn't capture what's really going on in your own bed, in your own life. Apple Watch data, on the other hand, gives researchers access to thousands of women's actual sleep patterns over months or years. They can see how sleep changes as women move through perimenopause and into menopause. What I find interesting is that this kind of data might eventually help us understand patterns we didn't even know existed. Like, are there certain sleep disruption patterns that predict when someone's about to hit menopause? Do hot flashes follow specific sleep stage patterns? This could lead to much better ways to predict and manage sleep problems during the transition. If you have an Apple Watch or similar device, you're basically contributing to science just by wearing it. Your sleep data, anonymized, of course, could help researchers understand menopause in ways that weren't possible before. There's something satisfying about that. For those of you thinking about weekend wellness, this is actually a good reminder to pay attention to your sleep data if you have access to it. Look for patterns. Do you sleep worse during certain parts of your cycle? Are there specific times when you wake up more often? That information could be really useful when you're talking to your healthcare provider. Speaking of weekend wellness, let's talk about something that comes up constantly in my conversations with listeners' weight gain during menopause. There's a new piece from Eating Well that breaks down why this happens and what you can actually do about it. The why part isn't exactly shocking. News estrogen decline affects where we store fat, our metabolism slows down, and we often lose muscle mass. But what I appreciate about this piece is that it doesn't just shrug and say, well, that's menopause for you. It actually offers practical strategies. One thing they emphasize is protein intake. During menopause, we need more protein to maintain muscle mass, but most of us aren't eating enough. They suggest aiming for about 25 to 30 grams of protein per meal, which is more than a lot of us are used to. That might mean adding Greek yogurt to your breakfast, or having nuts with your afternoon snack, or making sure your dinner has a substantial protein source. They also talk about strength training, which I know isn't everyone's favourite topic, but the evidence is really clear on this. After menopause, we lose muscle mass faster than before. Strength training, even just bodyweight exercises, can slow that down and help with metabolism. What I like about their approach is that it's not about restriction or some dramatic overhaul of your entire life. It's about small adjustments that actually make sense for where we are hormonally. One tip that stood out to me was about timing your meals. They suggest not skipping breakfast and trying to eat your largest meal earlier in the day when your metabolism is more active. This isn't groundbreaking advice, but it's the kind of thing that might actually be easier to implement on weekends when you have more control over your schedule. If you're looking for something to experiment with this weekend, maybe try tracking your protein intake for a day or two. Not to obsess over it, but just to get a sense of whether you're in the ballpark of what your body needs right now. You might be surprised by what you find. The reality is that our bodies are doing something completely different during menopause than they were doing before. Fighting against that doesn't usually work very well. But working with these changes, understanding them, adapting our habits accordingly, that seems to make a real difference. Thanks for spending another week with me. If you're enjoying Hot Flasher, hit subscribe wherever you're listening so these episodes just show up in your feed automatically. Have a great weekend, and I'll see you Monday with more stories from the menopause frontier.
That's our week. Thanks for listening to Hot Flasher. We'll be back on Monday. Have a great weekend, everyone.